Good morning, everyone. Lee Henson, President and Founder of Agile Dad here, and welcome to today's edition of the Daily Stand-Up. Without any further ado, let's get started. One of the things that we hear often when we walk onto projects and into organizations is a misunderstanding of how work gets translated. We recently released the Agile Meetings Playbook, and that's a helpful tool to help us at the figuring out how to talk about these things level, but I think there's still a great misunderstanding when it comes to how Agile projects should be funded. One of the core things that I've noticed is that even when we make all of the adjustments to our meetings and to our people and how work is organized, one of the key functions that we often miss or overlook is that we don't take into consideration how we're going to be paying for these projects and what makes the most sense from an Agile perspective. We use the traditional model for paying for projects, and that would be this department or this group is allocated this amount of money. Each product owner needs to propose or present what they want to do, and funding then gets allocated based on the product or project and based on the needs for that product or project across the organization. Sometimes it's allocated once annually for an entire year. Other times it's allocated for the duration of the project, and sometimes it's even allocated per quarter. But what I can tell you is if we go in with the attitude that, I need $3 million to build these 10 things, what ends up happening is you'll get approved, boom, because your 10 things are important. And now the expectation is that you're going to take the next year or year and a half to build these 10 things. And, that's great. You got the funding. Congratulations. Life is good. But as always, what happens is when we start building the first couple of items, we realize that this is going to be a lot harder than we thought it was going to be, that we only have the budget to build 5 out of the 10, and that each one is a lot more complicated or in-depth than we thought, because as we start to build them, the needs of the consumer start to change, or the needs of the end product start to change, and people say, yeah, that's great, but can we tweak this, or can we add this in, or can we regain focus, or can we do this? So what ends up happening is we have a clear vision of what we're trying to build and how we need to do it, and things are happening just right, but the problem is the funding was aligned with a cycle of delivering 10 things. So what ends up happening in the end? Well, we receive funding to build 10 items. At the end of the period allocated, we end up building 5. Now, the 5 we build are prolific. The 5 we build are, solve world hunger, create world peace, cure for cancer, cure for COVID. Really, really important things. But what winds up happening is, it doesn't matter how prolific those 5 things are when we walk into the room. The leadership who provided us that money, their first question is, what happened to the other 5, or where are the other 5? And I want to emphasize, it's not because they don't care about the 5 that you made. It's because you made a promise to deliver 10 items when in fact you only delivered 5. So how do you overcome this? How do you get organizations and teams and people to align to the fact that, when we ask for 10 things, we're not going to deliver 10 things? That certainly doesn't sound right. So how do we get that focal point back to where it needs to be? And what we've discovered is that instead of looking at work and saying, I need to solve, or I need to build these 10 things, we should walk in and say, I need $3 million. And when the question is, what do you need $3 million for? The answer should be to solve this problem, to enhance this process, to enhance this project, to make this better, to decrease time spent doing X, to increase consumer awareness, to make this easier for our target customer. We should always be looking to either enhance a process or solve a problem. And I think that when it comes to funding, we oftentimes just look to a number or a quantity of things we'll deliver. And anytime your focus is on delivering a quantity of widgets, that means your focus is certainly on output and not outcome. So how can we convince those who have financial pockets that we need to realign or reshift our focus to be more outcome-based and less output-based? And this is a tough conversation to have. I feel like so often, for years, we've been encouraged to really dedicate our focus to, can we deliver 8 things or 10 things or 5 things or 6 things? And, while that's incredibly great and incredibly important if we have all the knowledge we need to make that decision, 90% of the time, whether using Agile or not, when people ask us to forecast for things that are so far out beyond, the next couple of sprints, basically when you're giving that information, anything that's past 2 to 3 sprints out, in essence, I'm going to call you out here and say, you're lying. A lot of times it's so intangible and unpredictable at that point that any information that you're passing along with assurance is just not correct. There's no way for us to determine exactly what's going to happen, 6 sprints out, 8 sprints out, a year out, or even 5 years out especially. So how do we get that alignment back, and how do we teach organizations that it's important to follow this? And I think the key here is that if organizations understand that by limiting the focus of what we're building and applying the funding to where either A, we hurt the most, or B, where the need is the most, we are satisfying outcome of creating happy consumers who will come back over and over again, while limiting our output to as little as possible in order to make that happen. Now, if we limit our output to as little as possible, that means we will eventually have a cost savings. So smaller teams work together and swarm to build tangible outcomes that solve problems or that create enhancements for our end consumers with as little output as possible. Sounds kind of like utopia, but at the same time it sounds like reality for a lot of the organizations that Agile Dad coaches and works with. We make sure we place special emphasis on these things in order to help them be successful so that they can take these ideas back to their target customers and show that this is what differentiates them from everyone else. While many people might be following a contract or an agreement or something that says you must do this and must do that, most Agile Dad organizations go in and say, great, we have a working agreement in place of how we're going to work together and what our intent is and what we're going to do. But I think the most important piece is, what problem are we trying to solve today? And how can we be a best steward of the money that was allocated to us, instead of building something that's outdated, out of line, or not exactly within a consumer's needs? How can we realign that funding in a way that makes sense so that we're building the things that are going to have the highest tangible outcome to the consumer and the smallest amount of output? How can we get the results while putting in the important work without putting in waste? Well, I hope that this was incredibly valuable to you. I know I enjoyed talking about it. We encourage you to visit agiledad.com, where you can hear more information or read more information about this topic and many others. And we also encourage you, as always, to continue to subscribe to our podcast. We really appreciate our listeners, and we hope that you enjoyed this episode and encourage you to tell us about upcoming episodes. If there's a topic that you want us to cover, you can always email us at learnmore@agiledad.com. We love to hear from you, and we love to cover topics that are important to you. So as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile. Until next time, take care, my friends.